We met this week with the contractors, and we kind of put together a construction schedule, and so it's happening imminently in the next week or so. You might not see much for the first month or two. A lot of what they're going to do will be behind closed walls, and so they're going to be starting that process, though, soon. As with all good building projects, costs have kind of crept up on us as we've gotten closer and closer and some final numbers, and so the project's grown a little bit. I think to date the final need is somewhere around $80,000 that we're short of the total project, but it's going to be a several months long project, and we have some other options there. But first, I just want to say thank you to all of you that have partnered with the church and the kingdom to contribute to this fund. It's been amazing to see the outpouring of support. If you'd like to be a part of that, couple ways. You can obviously give financially. There's ways to do that online or through the offering boxes. And also just in prayer, that we just pray for this to be a useful space, that we've talked a lot about this project, and we're not building it so that they will come. We're building it because people are already coming, and that's all glory to God in that, but just continued prayer through that process. I think you've all felt the growth in the church and seen the need probably for more space. So just prayer in that. If you have any questions, certainly reach out to any one of us at any time. So thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody, and church family. At this time, we'll go ahead and dismiss the students to junior high Sunday school. So you guys are free to head on out. And as they're going out, just want to encourage you to grab your Bible. We're in the Old Testament in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, as we just continue to work our way through just this wisdom literature this summer. And just so you guys know, our hope and prayer every week, in the time we spend together, in the time we worship, and in the time we open God's Word, is our hope is that you would meet with and encounter and come to know Jesus. And in knowing Jesus, that you would just surrender fully to Him, that you would see that life, He has something, and somebody who's experienced, He has something, and somebody who's experienced in His Word this morning. And somebody who's experienced next to Him, and He says, please, when everything is said, and to the end of your life, what matters most isn't all that you've accomplished. It's not all that you've acquired, but it's not all that you've acquired, but what matters most, and what's really a gift to any and all of us, are the relationships we have. The deep, meaningful relationships with friends, and family are actually what lasts and endures. And what he's going to show us is in it for me. If you live your life like that, at the cost of relationship, you're going to end up feeling empty and lonely. And so what he's going to show us in chapter 4 is that life is so much better together in relationship with one another, and we all desperately need deep, meaningful relationships. I love the way Francis Chan describes it in his book, Crazy Love. He says this: nothing you do in this life will ever matter unless it's about loving God and loving the people He has made. Okay? So he says at the end of the day, what matters most is our relationships. And so we're going to look at why we all need meaningful relationships, and really kind of the core of what Solomon's going to express is found in verses 9 and 12. And so rather than going like verse by verse through chapter 4, we're going to kind of go to the core of what he says in verses 9 through 12 and then work our way out. And so why do we need meaningful relationships? Well, he gives us really some reasons why. And the first one is we can accomplish more together. Notice what he says in verse 9. He says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their toil. Okay, which I think we get. Like, teamwork makes the dream work. Some things are just definitely done better together, like moving a couch or working on a project. Like, things work better when we have more people involved. Like, many hands makes like light work. Like, that's what he's advocating for here. One of the ways we see the Christian life described in the New Testament is with the analogy of a race. That following Jesus is like running a race together. And maybe I'll illustrate it this way. Over the last several years, I've had the opportunity with a group of friends to run over the Eagle Caps, or like run or hike over the Eagle Caps in a day. And one of the things we do every year is we make T-shirts, and we come up with different slogans for them that we put on the back. And so last year, somebody picked out the slogan, "It's a hill, just get over it." So that was kind of the slogan we went by. One year it was like, we run until it's no fun. And then I don't know what we do after that, but that was a slogan. Or "Embrace the suck" was one of the slogans we had. But one of the ones that was actually my favorite was one that Cliff picked out one year, and it was this. Maybe you guys have heard it. It's an African proverb, and it says this: "If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together." Which is absolutely true. Like, if you want to go far, it's better to do it with somebody. But actually, when it comes to running a race, I think both is true. If you want to go fast, it's actually found that you go faster when you're running with somebody. And if you want to go far, it's better done in a group. And so, like, the worst place to be in a race, like a cross-country race, for instance, would be kind of with nobody in front of you that you can see that you're, like, trying to chase after, and nobody behind you to push you or to, like, encourage you to keep on going. If you want to run, like, a really long ways together with a group of people, they have actually pacers that run next to you and just say, like, "Don't give up. You can do this. You can go further than you want." And they give you, like, fuel and help you to, like, go further. There's, like, a whole crew of people that help you in that. And the same is true with running the race that God has set out for us. Like, if we want to run far together, like, if we want to last when it comes to following Jesus, if we want to endure, and if we want to become all that he wants us to be, it comes through working together. And so in our culture, like, I think a couple things that are really kind of elevated or admired are self-sufficiency and rugged individualism, like the ability to do things on our own. That actually has no place in a relationship with Jesus and following Jesus. We're called to be dependent on him and dependent on one another. And so Proverbs 27:17 would say, "Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another." And so how do we grow in our relationship with Jesus? How do we accomplish more? It's by being in deep, meaningful relationships. And so I would just say, like, if you're here this morning, you're like, "Man, I feel disconnected in my relationship with God," or "I feel like I'm stagnant," or "I'm not growing," or I don't feel like I'm actually becoming the person that Jesus has called me to be," I would just ask the question, like, who are you racing with? Who's your crew? Like, who's the group that's helping you along the way, that's encouraging you in your relationship with Jesus? That church is a team sport, and that the body functions best when we're working together. And so reason number one, we need deep, meaningful relationships is because we accomplish more together. He goes on to describe another reason in verse 10. He says this: "For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, and he has not another to lift him up." Okay, so why do we need relationship? Because life is hard and we all fall down, right? Like, life is difficult at times, and at times we all fall down. And so he gives kind of this imagery of, like, a guy going on a journey, and he falls into a pit. Or maybe picture being on a road trip, and you're stranded out in the middle of nowhere. What's really helpful in that situation is a friend who has a tow rope or jumper cables, or, like, can bring gas, right? Or can come and help you in that situation to rescue you. When you fall, what's helpful is to have people in your life that can actually pick you up. And the same is true with following Jesus. Like, when we fall and life falls apart, or when we fall into sin or fall into temptation or make compromising decisions, when life gets hard and we fail, you know what's really helpful is somebody who's there to help pick up the pieces. And so, man, I've been thinking about my own life this last week and people that have actually been a gift to me in my relationship with God. And a particular season that came to mind was during my sophomore year of college. Like I was just in a super low spot, had a really bad kind of breakup in a relationship, lost friends, kind of almost dropped out of Bible college, just quit attending classes altogether. And I was like, I'm not going into ministry. Like, I'm not doing any of these things. And what was really helpful was actually a professor who said, I'll give you an internship. I'll meet with you every week and have pizza. Like, I'll mentor you in what it looks like to follow Jesus. Like, don't give up on ministry. Like, I'll help you in this moment. And he actually helped me, as well as family members and friends, to get redirected. And he's one of the reasons that I'm in ministry today. And so, man, when life falls apart, when things get tough, like we're all prone to stumble and fall. And what's helpful is for people that will come alongside and help us pick up the pieces. He goes on to describe it this way in verse 11. He says, again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Okay, so he's not talking about like a romantic relationship here, but he's actually talking about, if you can imagine this, it's hard to imagine right now because it's the middle of summer and it's really hot. But if you can imagine in the middle of winter, being stranded out in the wilderness and being really with someone else to warm you up. And that's like helpful practically, but he's also talking, I think, figuratively, like, you know what's helpful when life gets cold, when things are difficult, like when life seems unbearable, is when the family of God or God puts other people in your life who can make the hard parts of life bearable, that we're better together. I think all of us can think of moments, right? Like maybe where somebody showed up in a hospital waiting room, or somebody showed up at your house, right? Or somebody made that phone call, or somebody just sat with you in that moment and made the difficulties of life more bearable, that God uses people to provide warmth, to provide comfort, to encourage us when life is hard, that we need one another, that we're better together. That's the point Solomon's making. He goes on to give a third reason in verse 12. He says, and though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Okay, so the third kind of analogy is you're on this journey. You get jumped by a group of people. What's really helpful in that moment when you get jumped is if you're not alone and you have a friend to protect you from getting sucker punched, right? Like that's the analogy he's given. And what's actually more helpful than having one friend is two. What's better than two is three. So it's better, like there's strength in numbers in that moment. That's the analogy that he's given us. And the same is true when it comes to following Jesus. In the spiritual battles that we fight, we need one another, right? I think all of us know that we're in a battle, that we all have an enemy. First Peter describes the enemy as a lion, like prowling around looking for anyone he can devour. John 10:10 says the thief comes to steal, to kill, and destroy. And so the enemy wants to take us away from our relationship with God. And how does the enemy take us away from our relationship with God? Well, if you ever watched National Geographic, or you know how predators work, like a pack of lions or a pack of wolves, what do? They try to isolate the one who's hurting, the one who's wounded, to separate them from the herd. And when are we the most vulnerable? When we isolate, right? When we say, I've got this on my own, right? When we separate from other people's, which honestly, like that's what we mostly do when we find ourselves struggling. And what Solomon says is, man, it's nice if somebody has your back. It's nice if somebody can stand next to you and help you fight those battles. And so he says, we need relationship. Like relationship is so important at the end of the day because we accomplish more together. We need people to encourage us when life gets hard, and we need people to stand beside and fight our battles with us, right? And so we're better together. That's Solomon's point. And I don't think that's new information to anybody, right? Like I don't think I don't think any of us don't know that, oh yeah, there's strength in numbers. If you've come to church for any amount of time, like we're always saying things like, man, you need to be in community, or there's no such thing as a Lone Ranger Christian, or following Jesus happens best with other people. And so I don't think any of this is new or any of this hasn't been taught. But the question I have when I read this passage is, well, then why so often do we settle for so much less? Why so often do we struggle to have these kind of deep, meaningful relationships? Why is it so much easier to isolate from other people? Why do we settle for kind of surface relationships when we're called to deep, meaningful relationships that God has designed us for? And I think if we zoom out in this passage, we actually see some of the things in life that maybe keep us from those kind of relationships. Some of the things that actually kill relationship or would actually keep us from the deep, meaningful relationships that we're designed for, and some of the reasons we settle for less. And so he gives us, I think, 4. There's probably more, but here's some of the ones we see in this passage. Notice what it says in verse 4. He says, "Then I saw that all toil and all skill and work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and a striving after wind." Why is it hard to have deep, meaningful relationships? Well, one of the things that actually takes us away from deep, meaningful relationships is competition and comparison. He says there's this envy, that it's hard to make deep, meaningful relationships if you're constantly comparing yourself to others or competing with those around you. Andy Stanley describes it this way. He says there's something within the human heart that calls us to actually have the factor over somebody else. And so there's something in the human heart that gives us like this need to feel like we're better than other people, or we're smarter, or we're funnier, or we're wittier, or we're prettier, or our kids are more talented, or we're more successful, or we're more popular, right? And you could just kind of go on and on with that list. But here's the truth. Competition, it actually kills closeness, right? Like it's impossible to get close to somebody if you're constantly competing with them. Teddy Roosevelt said this. He said, comparison is actually the thief of joy. And so a constant need to be better or to keep up with the Joneses, like it makes it hard to get close to each other. It's hard to get close to somebody if there's envy in your heart and what you secretly want for them is to fail, or you struggle to celebrate their victories. Okay, so Romans 12:15, here's what we're called to as believers. We're called to rejoice with those who rejoice, and we're called to weep with or mourn with those who mourn. And honestly, like I think we live in a culture who does the opposite. We don't rejoice in people's victories, right? Like we want to tear them down, and we don't mourn with people's failures. Sometimes we actually secretly rejoice in them. And he says that's going to always take us away from close, meaningful relationships. Why? Because you have to pretend to be excited about something you're not excited about. Or you have to pretend to be sad about something that you're not actually sad about. And so he says if we want to experience deep, meaningful relationships, like we want to squash competition and comparison, which honestly is hard in the culture we live in. Social media just kind of makes that even harder. But that's a barrier to relationship. If we're always looking at somebody else and we're asking, why not me? Or they don't deserve it, or we're jealous of their attention or the way in which they're celebrated, right? It's going to take us away from deep, meaningful relationships. And so we want to be friends that celebrate with one another. If you want to know who your true friends are, who are the friends that you're excited to share good news? Like, I can't wait to share good news with, like those that are excited about the things that you're excited about, those who will mourn with you when things are difficult. He says there's something in this world that actually takes us away from that, and so it kills really that meaningful relationship. The second thing we see in verse 5 is this. It says, the fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Kind of a weird picture, right? But it's this picture of like somebody who's so focused on themselves and doing nothing that in doing nothing, they actually end up eating themselves. Like they have nothing. And so what is something that kills relationships? He's talking about apathy. He's talking about laziness. Like it's this idea of like, I'm never going out. I'm just going to focus on me. I'm never going to do anything. And the reality is relationships take effort. Relationships take being intentional. And so it's this idea of because we're apathetic, because we're not initiating or connecting or putting in effort, the reality is we miss out on relationship. The third reason he actually gives is pretty much the opposite of that. Notice what he says in verse 6. He says, better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and a striving after wind. Again, I saw vanity under the sun. One person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil. And his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. Okay, so it takes us away from deep, meaningful relationships. It's not apathy or laziness, but the opposite is true, that it could be that it's busyness that's actually fueled by discontentment. It's a desire to always have more. Okay? And so he gives this illustration of somebody who's killing it at life, right? Maybe working like 70, 80 hours a week, kind of climbing the ladder, accomplishing all these things, acquiring all of these possessions. Like maybe he has a big house and he has all of these things, and he's super busy doing all these things, but his hands are so full that he really can't be present with the people that are next to him. And so he gets to the end of his life, he's like, man, I've done all these things and I have all this stuff, but there's nobody to share it with because I haven't made time for anyone in my life. And so the busyness actually crowds out relationship. Like it's really hard to be present with the people around you when we're so busy with all these things in our lives. Or we're always looking for more. Like there's got to be more to achieve, or there's got to be something ahead. And we're always looking towards the future, and we're not present with the people around us, and we miss out on relationship. It's that song, maybe you guys have heard the song, The Cat's in the Cradle, right? Like that's kind of what's illustrated here. It's Martha when Jesus comes over, right, to visit. That's what he's kind of getting at here. That busyness and filling our life with stuff actually leaves us unable to actually be present in relationship. I love the way John Mark Comer describes it in a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And also, I would just say this on a side note, if any of what I just described is like resonating with you and you're like, man, I just feel that rat race, or I feel like there's always something more, I'm always chasing the next thing, or I'm so busy I don't have time for people, or so focused and driven on what's ahead of me that I'm not present, I would just encourage you to read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. It's a great read, but here's what he says in it. He says, love and hurry are fundamentally incompatible. Love always takes time, and time is the one thing hurried people don't have. Okay? And so he says, if your hands are so full, you're not going to have time for anyone. So what does he advocate? What's the wisdom? How should we approach life? Well, he says it's not like folding our hands and doing nothing. It's not just like sitting around, relaxing, chilling all the time. It's not our hands so full of all the things that we're doing that we don't have time for people. What he actually advocates is, in one hand, we do the tasks and work that God has assigned us, and we work really hard at that. And we actually use the other hand to be generous and giving to those around us. That we actually have a hand that's free and available to actually help people and pull them up, right, when they're struggling, or actually be generous enough to give of our time and what we have to them, that it's not 2 hands full, that it's actually giving with one hand. That's what he's advocating here. The last thing that actually kind of takes us away from relationship and why we might miss out on deep, meaningful relationship is found in verse 13 through 16. Here's the description he gives. He says this: Better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. For he went from prison to the throne, though in his own kingdom he had been born poor. I saw all the living who move about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's place. There was no end of all the people, all of whom he led. Yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and a striving after wind. There's a lot going on in this story here. We're not going to unpack like all that this illustration is or all that he's getting at. But I think one of the things that he's getting at here, or the picture he paints, is of a king who no longer takes advice. And he's so prideful that he won't take advice from anyone, and the result is he's actually resented by people and not loved by people. And so what actually kills relationships? What actually will keep us from developing the kind of deep and meaningful relationships that God has for us? I think one of the things is pride and the inability to take advice. Like, it's really hard to be friends with somebody who always has to be right, who's not willing to take advice. Proverbs 27:6 describes it this way. It says, wounds from a sincere friend are better than kisses from an enemy. What's he getting at there? I think what he's getting at is this. We need people in our life who love us enough to tell us the truth, even when it's painful and even when it's hurt. That's what a real friend looks like. An enemy is somebody who just always tells us, like, you're doing great, like, keep doing things the way you're doing, right? But isn't really willing to confront us with our blind spots. Like, it isn't really willing to tell us the truth even when it's difficult. That somebody who's willing to speak the truth in love is actually a gift. And we want to have the humility to receive it. That healthy relationships require humility. Pride always is going to isolate us from other people. A teachable heart strengthens relationships, but a proud heart slowly destroys them. And so I think another thing that kills relationship is just our inability to take advice. So what do we do with this morning? I think it's a lot, right? If you guys can remember all those things, like, good for you. There's a lot there. But I think here's kind of the bottom line. I think all of us, we desire these kind of deep, meaningful relationships. In fact, I think that's probably part of the reason why we're here this morning, right? We recognize that we need community. And so how do we do it? Like, how do we move forward in that? How do we even do that as a church? Like John said, we're a church family. But here's the reality. I look out at all of you, and there's a lot of people here this morning that I don't know. And if you guys were to take the time and look around at the people next to you, there's a lot of people that you don't know. And there's a lot of people that maybe there's surface level relationships. So how do we do that? How do we have the kind of deep, meaningful relationships that God desires for us? And I would say, like, it's not a quick fix. It's not like a program. There's nothing we can do overnight to actually develop this, right? The relationships take time. And here's what I would also say. Relationships are risky with the potential of getting hurt, and relationships are messy. Like, they're difficult. So how do we do this? How do we move forward in this? And I would just say maybe two ways to respond to this morning. The first one that I was totally struck with when I read this passage was this. We just need to thank God for the people who are like this in our lives. Like, the deep, meaningful relationships that you have with friends and family, those are a blessing, and those are a gift, and we just need to give God thanks for those. And I would challenge you to this. Also go and thank those people. Let them know how much they mean to you, because when it's all said and done, like, that's what matters. And so I just would encourage just gratitude in that. And then I would encourage you to do this. Just take one step this week towards deep, meaningful relationships. And so maybe it's this. Maybe you look at kind of those things that kill relationships, I think all of us could look at those and say, man, I've been there, and sometimes I am there. Like sometimes there's envy in my heart, or sometimes there's pride, and I don't want to take advice, or sometimes I just want to isolate from other people, or I'm so busy kind of focused on what I want to do that I don't have room for other people, right? I think all of us could maybe look at areas where we could grow on that, and I would just encourage you to confess those before God, and then maybe take one small step. And maybe the one small step is this. Maybe the one small step looks like you've been fighting a battle with sin all by yourself, and you just need to find somebody who you trust and confess that to them. Say, here's where I'm struggling, and I just need somebody to pray with me or walk with me in that. Maybe the one small step means maybe you've severed a relationship, and it's a deep, meaningful relationship, and there's distance, and maybe you just need to go first and say, here's what I want to own, and I'm sorry for this. And maybe it means apologizing. Maybe it means repenting. Maybe the next step for you is, if you're here this morning and you're like, man, I want to connect in a deep, meaningful way, and I've been coming to church, how do I get into community? Like, is it a secret handshake? Like, I see like all this community here, like, how do I get in? I would just want to let you know this. If you're new here, that's you've been coming for a while and struggling to find community, I just want you to know, like, we're so glad you're here, and we want you to know that you belong here, and we want to welcome you into the family. And there's not like an easy way to do that, but maybe some next steps would look like this. One, I would just encourage you to sign up for our meet and greet, right? Where you can kind of hear what we're about as a church and how to get connected or how to serve or how to get involved in a small group. I would also encourage you, maybe come to Summer Connect. That's happening this week, and it's just a really low-key way to come and share a meal with one another, to come together and play some games, and just maybe get to know some people and make some friends that way. Or just fill out a Connect card, and we'll call you and connect with you, and maybe find out a way really to get you connected to the church body. Maybe that's the next step for you. Or maybe it's this. Maybe you're here this morning and you're carrying a burden, and you just need somebody to pray with you. We would love to do that. There'll be people available after the service that can pray with you. Or maybe find a friend or somebody you know sitting next to you and say, here's where I'm going, what I'm going through, and I just need somebody to be with me in this and to pray with me in this. And lastly, I would say this. If you're here this morning and you don't know Jesus, the next step for you is to actually engage in the most important relationship in your life, and that would be to surrender your life to Jesus. Like, it's impossible to love other people in a deep, meaningful way if you don't know and understand the love that Jesus has for you. That he's the one who actually fights our battles for us, that he's the one that promises never to leave us or forsake us, that he's the one that's with us no matter what we're going through, and his love for us is unconditional, and it's demonstrated to us on the cross. And so this morning, I'm just going to invite us to take maybe a few moments and pray together, and I just want to challenge you to take that next step towards relationship. The reality is we need each other, and we're designed for relationship, and we're so much better together. Will you pray with me this morning? God, as we come, God, so thankful for this church family, and man, just the opportunity we get to build deep, meaningful relationships that aren't based on similar interests or things that we do together, but that are really centered around you, Jesus, and just the truth that we're fully known by you and fully loved by you, and we have been welcomed and adopted into your family. And so, God, I just pray that you would bind us together, that you would help us grow in relationship with one another. God, that we would not be so busy doing all the things that are focused on ourselves, that we would have margin in our lives to be intentional with those that you've placed around us, and that in everything we do, God, we would just point to you in the truth that you've designed us for relationship with you.
Thank you for loving us. Thank you for this time together. It's in your name we pray. Amen.